Hey guys, how's it going? It's Tyler, leader of the Reclamation Party, and I'm going to start doing some small videos like this, 5 to 30-ish minutes, just talking about our political party's reasoning for some of our commitments we're going to make, as well as other things in domestic and geopolitics that's going on right now in the world. So you can tune in for both the geopolitics and the domestic, and hear about the reasoning we have for what we're doing, and why we formed this party. So I'd like to start off with what I think is one of the most important things that we need to take into account when talking about some of the current leaders that are running. So, mainly being Pierre Poilievre for the leader of the Conservatives. It's really hard to listen to a lot of what this guy has to say as somebody who's watched politics my entire life and actually take what he's saying seriously. There's a couple of reasons there. I'm going to clarify. I'm in my garage right now. I was just working on my car and just having a cigarette. So you see smoke and you hear an echo. That's what's going on with that. But basically, he just did a speech today when I'm filming this, which is, let me just take a look here, February 20th. Okay, and he just did a speech today, and again, he doubled down on what I think is the most ridiculous and slightly dangerous plans that he has in terms of the economy and everything else in the Fed is dollar for dollar spending. So you have to save $1 here to spend $1 there. It sounds great on paper, like pretty much all of his ideas. They sound great on paper, but when they're actually put into implementation, well, none of his ideas have, because they've been awful, frankly. They've always been voted down, okay? His last major idea that was voted down when he was under Harper was to stop unions from collecting money to pay their lawyers to represent their workers. Okay, so just for an idea of past bills he's tried to push, they're all bad. There's no bills that pass the floor under his name, and the reason is they tend to be highly restrictive in areas that Canadians don't want to see restrictions, like union money. Okay, if you don't like the union you're with, you can join a different one, work somewhere else. Lots of fish in the sea. For an example, I'm a union member. I no longer am. I won't say what union I'm with, but I was formerly with 183 Union. For an example, in regards to me knowing what I'm talking about with unions, okay? So, basically, $1 for $1 is absurd. It's not only non-feasible, it's proof. I hate to say I'd agree with the Liberals on anything, because I really don't. I'm going to stop myself from cursing there. But, it's cuts. There's no other way about it to look at it. So again, honesty and transparency are the main things for me and my party, okay? So we're always going to be honest. It doesn't always mean we'll be popular, frankly. But you can always know that when you look at us, you're getting the truth, okay? Basically, let's take defense spending, okay? I want this to be as much closely as possible to a conversation between two people, even though there'll probably be many views on this video, as can be. Okay, so really, give me a second here. Hear me out on this. Defense spending, we're short to the 2% of about $24 billion. Okay, that $24 billion isn't going to come from anywhere else. It's not possible. It's why he's avoided the 2% commitment, and I believe the other week he had another speech where he said, yeah, well, it's not about the 2%, it's about having the best equipment. And in some aspects of that, I agree. Our allies and our NATO alliance that we are a member of, in fact, a founding member, I'd add, completely disagrees with that, as does the activities of the Russians in Ukraine. Okay, we don't even have enough people to service all the boats that we have in terms of staff for the new ones we're building, the DeWolf class. And where's that going to come from? Where's the money, the $24 billion, to reach 2%? Or is he just not going to do it at all? In which case, what can we expect in changes to our defense spending and habits that are going to see us become this new great military? It's simply not there. He has no intention of spending money on the military in any real way. Okay, even the icebreakers. He says 2 icebreakers for the Canadian Navy, and they will be armed. Unfortunately and sadly, the Canadian version of quote-unquote armed is very different from most of the world, okay? The DeWolf class is armed with 250s, 250 cal heavy machine guns, okay? I believe some of our boats, again, have 30 or 40 millimeter cannons. Those are pretty useless, if we're going to be honest, okay? We are not prepared for any sort of serious ship-to-ship combat, and frankly, the modern era, that's done by both missile and torpedo. It's not done through large-scale heavy bombardment, like it was during World War II, as an example. That's simply not going on. So, that's the military. So he's not going to be able to fund that. And then where are the cuts going to come? He's already attempting to say that he's going to blackmail, basically, cities for their infrastructure money, or provinces for their infrastructure money, because they don't build what he wants where. But frankly, that's not up to him. That's up to the people who live in those areas, who pay the property taxes in those areas. If they don't want a high-rise, they have every right to vote against it in their suburban area. And the federal government has no jurisdictional right to come in and tell them, well, then we aren't going to give you the infrastructure money that we normally would. That's blackmail. Okay? He's using that as a way to hold it over their heads. And it's ridiculous, and it frankly isn't the first time it's been tried. Everywhere but Japan it's been tried, it failed. Okay? And Japan's a very different culture from ours. So let's get that straight. A dollar for dollar is going to be an absolute failed policy that he intends to make a policy, make law. So that'll restrict future governments to come, which means when we need to make serious investments, that'll have to be repealed first. Because it's basically going to suffocate out any capability to run a deficit. I want Canadians to really think about that. Really, really think about that. Okay? When we need more healthcare investment, not just from the provinces, but from the Fed as well, where's that money going to come from? Because he says he's also somehow going to lower taxes by, again, some mythological unicorn of using tariff revenue to cut taxes. That isn't how that works, Mr. Poilievre. And he should know that. That will come in as tariff revenue, will come in as tariff revenue. It will be an entirely separate sum of money from your income tax revenue. So if he cuts income taxes by 2%, let's say, okay, which is nothing, frankly, to Canadians. And then he's basically already said this, he's going to keep the money, even though he says he won't, he will, and he's going to use that to offset the Treasury, to offset the coffers of the Fed. And he's going to say, yeah, you got a tax cut, and we're using that money to give you this tax cut. What he's not telling you, again, there's a lot of wordplay that's gone on with all these leaders, and it's part of why we're doing this, okay? It's because this wordplay has to stop. We need to bring back honesty. So the honest answer would be that tariff revenue is going to be held, given to the Fed, staying in its treasury, but he will write off the tax cut by keeping that revenue. It's the only way. It's the only way to do anything feasible in the long term. And it's ridiculous, because it's not what he actually is intending to get across to Canadians, how Canadians are taking that. They're taking it as a tax cut, and that he's going to give the revenue back to businesses and everybody's not. He made that abundantly clear, that he's going to use that money to give a tax cut. Okay, that's a very different thing than I think many Canadians believe it will be. Now, the other thing is he won't really commit to cutting taxes when it comes to income tax. He made that clear during Parliament, before it was prorogued. He was asked many, 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 many times, okay, about how much income tax he would cut, and he won't cut any. He even said in a prior speech before Parliament was prorogued that he can't make those promises because he's too concerned about the dumpster fire from the Liberals. There's a nugget of truth in there, for sure. But overall, that's just an excuse to say, yeah, no, we're not willing to do it. An example of where, again, my party, the Reclamation Party, is very different. We've already committed fully to a real commitment you can hold us accountable to, which is 5% off the lowest two brackets and getting rid of the 29 and 26% tax brackets entirely. Flat bracket, 24% up to $250,000. So the average worker, like me, works Southern Ontario in a manufacturing job, okay, making under $100,000 a year, it's about $5,000 back in my and your pocket that you aren't paying the taxes, okay? In some cases it's more, in some cases for the lowest brackets it's a little less. We're still talking about thousands. And he can't even give you a number for what he'll cut, if any at all. And we need to take that seriously, because the Conservatives in particular have a habit of cutting taxes and cutting spending. Okay, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Excuse me, cold out here. But a bit of a double-edged sword, okay? When you cut the taxes back, you have less revenue, obviously, for the Fed. But then, at the same breath, especially for Poilievre right now, he's talking about increasing spending somehow. Right? For an example, the 2 icebreakers, okay? Canada's building 2 icebreakers already that were put in by the Liberal government. And they're about $7.4 billion in cost, okay? The main reason is we only ordered 2. Ordering 2 more that now are different designs, because they're going to have to be armed. That ammo has to be stored somewhere, by the way. So this is a different design. It's not going to be the same. Canadian procurement systems are awful. There's a high chance he could spend $10 billion on those. So then the question will be, when is he going to tell us he isn't going to do them anymore because they're too expensive? The main reason all this is costing so much in terms of shipbuilding is the numbers. We don't order enough. It's that simple. A whole infrastructure system and dock and or lock, however it's referred to, has to be built to build these icebreakers, basically one by one. And all of that has to be done at a way that the company can recoup its costs that's building them. How are they supposed to do that if we order 2? Well, then the price has to go up because they can't do it for free. In reality, the actual projections that we need from professional sources would say roughly about 10 or more to actually patrol our Arctic properly and in a real sense of the word patrol. Okay, armed or not armed when it comes to these icebreakers. And right now we're scheduled, if his plan panned out, to have 4. It's a joke. Now we're better than the Americans. They have none, really. But, and none in the works, I'd add. But it's still an extremely small amount. And we should be very cautious about these proposed quote-unquote tax cuts he's going to give, okay? When it comes to projects that I want to do, my party wants to do, we're telling you up front how we're going to do it, okay? Basically, by early January, well, before that, technically, by December 18th, we had made the decision amongst the party, in terms of the officers, that we were going to have a commitment to build 10 new icebreakers. Really 13, but you could break the number down depending on if you want to count the ones that are coming out or not. Personally, I don't want to count them. So that would mean 13 new icebreakers, and we want to build 4 nuclear-powered super heavies. Okay, that's to be competitive with the Russians. Although, mind you, theirs are getting to be over 50 years old. Their nuclear-powered icebreaker fleet. It's old. It's on its way out. So that would put us in a very serious position to control the Arctic in a real way. But it's not done overnight. Those will be built over a decade. Again, honesty is a big thing. An example, LNG. Some of these LNG plants are already almost done, but they were put in. They were approved, by the Harper government. So really think about that for a minute. I mean that. The Harper government was 9 years ago. Some of these were approved before that. Some of these are 10 to 12-year projects. Okay? And that is relatively average. A little over the average, but still within the realm. Okay? He cites the Germans, who built an LNG accepting port in 18 months. That is, in terms of infrastructure, as well as population density and everything else, that is the equivalent of building an LNG facility on Lake Ontario in downtown Toronto. I really want Canadians to really think about that. That is the equivalent of infrastructure feasibility and access that the Germans had at that port where they did this. Okay? Germany is a heavily industrialized nation. They could do that because it was something that they have done before in terms of port expansions, and they aren't trekking things across a nation to do it the size of ours. Okay? The only source that we can look at in terms of distance that's somewhat similar is the US and the Russians. Okay? But for the moment, again, let's circle back. Dollar for dollar. It's not possible. And it will hamstring him and governments to come. So if he does do it, which I'm hesitant to say is 50-50, once he actually gets in there and gets the actual idea of what's going on, Canadians need to ask where that money's coming from. Who is he going to cut that from in terms of services? What service? Where? By how much? Because it certainly sounds to me, and I believe many Canadians, that this is just a fantasy. This is what he believes is the best idea. And again, on paper, sounds good. But like the majority of his ideas, on paper, they sound great. You start digging into the actual reality, and it gets incredibly complex and also incredibly backward from what he is voicing it will be like. Again, dollar for dollar. So think about that. If he's going to build 2 new icebreakers, and they're going to be armed, and they're going to cost, let's even go low end, let's say 7 billion flat. So somehow, even though they're armed, they're going to cost the same, a little less actually, than the 2 that are unarmed being built for the Coast Guard right now. Where is that going to come from? And if he's going to say they're for the Navy and pull it from military procurement, that's $7 billion that the military doesn't have to have procurement elsewhere. Okay, including in growth. Where is that going to come from? How is that going to appear? Again, he's talked east to west pipeline. He supports it. It doesn't matter how much corporate tax you cut. None of the companies are seriously interested in an east to west pipeline because the risks are too high. Okay, the Quebecers are an amazing people and a great culture. They have their own opinions, as they're allowed to, and they have refused to let pipelines through in the past, as well as the immense costs of doing it. There's a high probability that if we want it done, and Quebec agrees that they want it done too, then we will have to build it federally ourselves. There is a massive chance that that is how that will have to play out, which means with a Poilievre government, it's never going to happen. It's billions and billions of dollars. It's never going to happen because you can't do it. It's the exact reason Stephen Harper never did it. Stephen Harper, me and the Liberals agree on pretty much, or disagree pretty much on everything. Because the Liberals are just incredibly incompetent and ridiculous. But Stephen Harper never built a pipeline. The Liberal government had to buy it out, basically take it over to get it finished, because the costs to build in Canada are high. And I recognize that. And I'm willing to be honest with Canadians about it, especially about my Northern Rail and Road Initiative, right? Northern Rail and Road Project. That's going to build in Southern Nunavut. That's 2,600 kilometers of road and rail. Probably more by the time it's done. It's not cheap. It's not going to be done overnight. But the benefits in the long term are immense. But it's a long-term investment, right? And that's going to be, we've explained how that's going to be paid for. We're going to stop all foreign aid spending. Again, something that we committed to do very early on in the formation of our party just a few months ago. And obviously now that Donald Trump's brought it up, Pierre Poilievre's bringing it up. Shocking, I know. He has no real original ideas, which concern me greatly. He considers the prior Harper government, as he put it in his speech up north about the icebreakers, the prior common-sense conservative government. The Harper government pushed back retirement age by 2 years for nearly all Canadians born that are, again, middle-aged about right now. But that was common sense, right? Cut 1,000 people from the border, like 900 at Veteran Affairs. Common sense. Didn't build a pipeline. Common sense. Approved the LNG facilities was actually probably the only common sense thing he did. But that's pretty much where that ends, okay? Also, I'd add that when it came to increases for child benefits of some kind, they made their newest add-on in an election year taxable. Think about that. Imagine if the child tax benefit was taxable. It's crazy. Hundreds to thousands, tens of thousands of families would lose a serious chunk of money that they get every month or so. To me, I just don't see how you can fund what we already have, forget the newer dental program, which I support. I say leave it in. But be honest with Canadians at the actual cost, the actual numbers. Again, he tells us don't trust Stats Canada on how many things, on how many doctors have joined up with that. Don't trust Stats Canada, Poilievre says. But when he gets in, he's going to tell you to trust Stats Canada for anything he thinks is good. It's ridiculous. And frankly, a little dangerous. Stats Canada's basically independent. So that's nuts. But besides the point, dollar for dollar is not going to work for our country. We have underinvested for decades. Then to say that our underinvesting can be solved by not spending, well, You guys can figure that out for yourselves. I'm no, Stephen Hawking. This isn't overly complex. Where's the money going to come from? How are you going to pay for these projects? And how are you going to get anything done when you don't have revenue and you don't have revenue, you're not willing to run a deficit, and you're not willing to make long-term investments that may come at a cost of additional debt. And if you can't find $1, you can't spend $1. That's really what it should be in terms of slogan. Again, Poilievre was an attack dog. Slogans are what he does. And let me tell you, over the decades, he's had some great ones. Near legendary. But they've never come to fruition to be an actual policy that was effective for Canadians. They've never helped anyone except the Conservative Party. Right? So, really think about that. The other thing is where all their money comes from when it comes to the politics. I'll touch on that more in another video, but my party is the only party that doesn't take campaign financing. We don't fundraise. This is entirely off of our own merits as human beings and as a party with a plan. We don't take any money, okay? Poilievre's taken hundreds of thousands, okay? Hundreds of thousands. And so have the Liberals. The parties have immense wealth. And they use their party and their political power as leader, often, to strangle out those who disagree. It's ridiculous. Anyone can be a part of my party and disagree with what I have to say, as long as they're bringing ideas to the table. That's the fair thing. That's what real leaders do, okay, guys? They don't hamstring and suffocate out those who disagree, okay? There's always there's a nugget of truth to every lie. When it comes to Poilievre, there's been a lot of nuggets laid out, but a lot of people are not willing to pick them up. They aren't sure what to look for. I'm trying to tell you what to look for here. This is a constant play on words. You're going to hear it. It's not going to stop. And there's going to be absolutely no real policy coming from it. Again, he doubled down today. He says he's going to somehow put in $1 for $1. And I really hope that Canadians can see the error in that. And I really hope, frankly, that doesn't happen. Because I love this country. Excuse me. I want to see it grow. I want to see our military become a better military than it is today. I want to see our Navy expand and get more personnel. That's not going to happen without money. It's not. Serious investments have to happen. Again, Harper ran 6 deficits. Some of them, now mind you, 2008, so you give a little leeway with that one. But that was a $56 billion deficit. That's not nothing. It's almost $60 billion, right? So this idea that, again, Canada doesn't need to run deficits is absurd. We don't want debt. Nobody does. But we aren't at a point in our economy right now where we can balance the budget in a 2-year period, for example. And I don't believe anybody's saying that. But even at the end of the 4 years, Poilievre will tell everyone that he's balanced the budget. And meanwhile, healthcare will be on the verge of collapse, and housing will continue to rise. It's that simple. The entire foundations of our housing crisis and the healthcare crisis were laid by Harper and Poilievre. Mostly Harper, because Poilievre didn't really play a big part in the government at all. But they were laid by Harper. And then the Liberals came in and had such extreme incompetence, okay, such absurd levels of, frankly, stupidity, that they turned what was a problem, a crack in, let's say, the house's foundation, into an explosive hole that just has not stopped in its continual spread throughout the foundations of our country, okay? We have to get things back under control. But that doesn't mean we need to be scared to spend. Again, Poilievre has more in common with a libertarian political view than he does with an actual, conservative, traditional, or progressive conservative view, okay? And it's a problem Canadians need to be aware of. They need to really pay attention to how he's going to pay for projects he's promising to pay for, right? And all that's before the fact that, again, he wants to build an airbase in Iqaluit. Iqaluit's a great spot. However, he's entirely facing the wrong direction because, frankly, he hasn't put any thought into this. I'm sure somebody pitched it to him as a great idea, and he goes, yep, that's it, we're going to do it, instead of putting actual thought into what he's doing. So the actual thought into what he's doing would be that the Russians are most likely to come from Siberia, okay? Not Siberia, over by Finland, because that's not Siberia. Siberia by the Bering Sea, near Alaska. That's where the Russian planes are for the most part, with the limited bases they have there, mind you, and the Arctic Russian fleet. So why are we not talking about the Yukon at all? In fact, the Yukon has more road access than Iqaluit or all of Nunavut. Again, a big point of my party is building road and rail in Nunavut, with the approval of Nunavut, of course, that we would entirely fund with the foreign aid budget, as well as the Grays Bay Port Project, which I will add, the Grays Bay Port Project, which the Premier of Nunavut has pushed for, includes a military base in that plan. That's serious. That's a port, deep water port. Okay? That's a serious thing. And he's not even talking about it. Why? Because Nunavut has asked for the Fed to fund about 75% of the project. About $700 million. And he's not going to spend that money. It could revolutionize the North. Okay? As well as my NRRP will. But you tie the two together. And just in the resources, just in, again, a sensitive issue for Nunavut. And I understand why, because they've been taken advantage and screwed over too many times. But we have a real honest, upfront partner in the Fed to deal with Nunavut and be honest that, hey, we will provide this money. We can build the infrastructure. We can provide the jobs and opportunities while still protecting traditional life for the Inuit. There is an unfathomable amount of resource potential that Nunavut would like to see harvested and sent out. Nunavut needs the money, frankly, for its growing population. They've doubled about every 20 years. And that's continuing. That pace is not slowed. The Inuit are some of the youngest Canadians by demographic age. We need to take that into account. Okay, that's a massive resource pool in terms of if they're willing to, they want to work instead of, again, a traditional subsistence lifestyle, which is freedom of choice, frankly, that they should always have. Go and work where? To do what? Right? Fly an airplane? Well, that's actually a limited pool that only some people can do and others can't. So we need to provide opportunity there and infrastructure that's actually feasible. We shouldn't be looking at Iqaluit when there's a military U.S. air base on Greenland in the north, right there. It's not that far. You guys can go and look it up and find out where it is. That is already a major point where the U.S. has plenty of technology, let's be frank, that's watching everything in that area. The area that they're most concerned about, the Americans, and frankly, we should be as well, is up by the Yukon, by Alaska. The Russians care about poking at the Alaskan waters now and then, as well as ours. Okay? The Yukon has absolutely no northern port access at all. The potential is there, but they simply don't right now. And again, it's all lack of investment. None of these investments I've talked about are going to be possible or even happen, period, if the dollar for dollar goes through. It simply won't. And Poilievre will go down as one of the worst prime ministers Canada's ever had, besides Justin Trudeau. For a funny idea here, for my own little 2 cents of haha, Stephen Harper had the lowest economic growth. Justin Trudeau ran on this as an attack, and it was true. One of the lowest economic growths of any prime minister since the Great Depression. Completely true. You can go look at the graphs. It's horrendous. And then Trudeau made himself the first in terms of the worst for economic investment. Okay. And the difference, for an example, Chrétien was about, I want to say, 1.5 to 2%, okay, in growth. Stephen Harper was 0.5. Yeah. Now, you could say, hey, that's the economic recession of 08, 09. I'd say you got a little bit of a fair point there, but then just as easily the Liberals point to a global pandemic as their excuse. So, again, if one excuse is okay, the other one is too. As far as I'm concerned, they're both excuses. Okay? They both felt that they did what they needed to do, and overall, both parties have failed Canada entirely in the long term. Harper didn't make the proper investments. Harper didn't want to spend the money, okay, and then tried to say he had a surplus, and then Trudeau came in and basically blew the hole right open in terms of an endless pit to throw money down and get nothing done. So Canadians really need to think that over. I gotta go to work in a minute, so I'm gonna be ending this video in a second. But I like to close by saying that we can do better. Okay, the Reclamation Party, we want to do better. We're everyday working Canadians like you guys, and frankly, we don't trust any of the politicians. We don't trust the Liberals. We don't trust the NDP. Frankly, I don't even trust the Green Party because they all have extremities in their points and in their politics. And we don't need that. The Liberals have been the most successful party in Canadian history because they kept to the center, because that's where most Canadians are. Now they're a far left party, in my opinion. And Canadians don't want that. But I also think that the majority of Canadians, especially conservative voters, again, I have a lot of conservative tendencies and leanings myself. Okay, seriously, I'm a father of 5. All right, I've been with my wife for 14 years. Okay, plain and simple, Poilievre's not going to make the investments we need. It's not going to happen. It's been a continuous problem that Canada's faced, and it's not going to go away. So I really hope you guys have a great day. Some food for thought. Really think about it. Really ask yourself, how is he going to pay for any of this? And where is that dollar for dollar going to come from? He says it himself. It's going to come from one place and go to another. So where is it going to come from? All right. You guys enjoy your evening. Have a great day.